check in with yourself right now. Do you feel light, energized, clear-minded, healthy? And if so, chances are you are operating at a higher vibrational level. On the other hand, if you are feeling weighed down, repressed, oppressed, you are most likely operating at a low vibration. And there are so many factors as to why this can be, and we are going to get into that a little bit, but I'm just gonna sort of tease this a little bit. Not only is it important for us to tap into these high vibes however we can, but surrounding ourselves with really high vibrational things and places and people, that is a really important piece to this. This is the Life with Grief podcast, the podcast that talks about and normalizes the complexities of grief, life after loss, and all this entails, and so much more. I want you to think of this podcast as a safe space where I'm a friendly face and we're just journeying through this together to figure out how to live life with our grief in tow. I'm your host, Tara Accardo. I'm a grief and transformational life coach, and I'm here to serve you guidance, support, tangible coping tools, inspiration, and some laughs along the way to help you cultivate a more meaningful, intentional, and beautiful life. But grieving or not, we're getting into countless topics here on the podcast, from coping with loss to self-development and so much more. I'm so grateful you're here. Let's dive right in. Hey there, welcome back to the Life with Grief podcast. I'm your host, Tara Accardo, and today we are talking about a really important topic that I think is so important as we're grieving or as we're going through a hardship of really any kind, but is just not spoken about enough, not in my opinion, at least. And I think it's so important because this mindset shift and being aware of what we're talking about today can be so pivotal as we cope with the day-to-day complexities of everything and just life after loss and just really life in general. And so I think it's great to bring awareness to this today. And fun fact, this entire episode is based on one of my most popular blog posts. Like, by and large, this is still my most visited blog post, which I think is so awesome. But I think it just goes to show how needed it is. So I wanted to put it in audio form for you today as well, but I've also enhanced this a little bit since I wrote that blog post a while back. So I'm super excited to get into this with you today. So the overarching goal of today's episode is to understand frequency and vibrational levels during grief, or again, just any difficult time in life that we might be going through, and how keeping those things high can positively affect coping with grief, coping with loss, and really just to improve your daily life, loss or not. And also, I have 20 ways that you can raise your frequency coming toward the end of this episode, so be sure to stick with me and stick around for that. But before we get started, let's sort of define exactly what we're talking about here. Maybe you're listening to this episode and you already have some familiarity with this, but are kind of just curious and want sort of just a little bit of empowerment today. Or maybe this is just really sort of new for you. So wherever you are today, let's just kick this off by defining what the heck a high frequency or high vibrations are anyway. And you might have heard, this term like good vibes and high vibes and whatever. And I catch myself saying that as well. And that's ultimately kind of what we're talking about. The way I've come to understand this and these things, it's actually quite scientific, but was actually introduced to me by a friend with a whole lot of wisdom several years ago. I would say I was familiar with what emanating a high frequency and high vibrations were, but it really didn't resonate with me until someone called me out on it. Long story short, back in the spring of 2020, which by the way, lost my mom in December 2019, lost my dad in July of 2020. So this is summer of 2020 that this conversation I'm about to tell you about took place. This kind of low negative frequency and vibes that I was giving off wasn't so focused on the losses of my parents. I mean, that's not entirely true. It was, of course it was. But I had already been processing that grief and especially the anticipatory grief of losing my father mom was already gone. So I was like really just starting to grieve that at that point. But really, this was in relation to the breakup that I was going through with my now husband, but then boyfriend, John. And I think I was really feeling that like negativity, because that loss in relationship still felt alive. Like it still felt unfinished. And I mean, I was just in hell, you guys, truly. Like, I hate to throw that word around, but like, I just was in such, frankly, a dark place between both of these deaths and then this breakup. Like, it was just a lot of loss back to back to back. So this friend, she said two very poignant things to me. And I'm, of course, paraphrasing this now, but one thing she said was the advice that I needed to surround myself with more high vibrational, high frequency people. And from what she reflected back to me, she did not feel that this was the case with John at the time. Like, he was not bringing the most high, positive, beautiful vibes and frequencies to my life. And she was absolutely correct. That breakup and everything surrounding that was sucking me dry. And the unknown of everything, like this whole unknown of like what my life without my parents now looked like, but then also the unknown of this not having this relationship in my life anymore, that was crippling. And I was just a very deeply, deeply broken person. This leads me to the next thing that she said. And again, she was reflecting all of this back to me and kind of just letting me sit with it, but really just her own observation. She felt I was operating at a very low vibrational level, like to the point where she could even feel it emanating from me. So let's dissect this for just a second, because first of all, I want to just ask you, I want to put this out there to you. Have you ever had someone say this to you? Like, just think about that for a moment. Or that your aura is coming off a certain way, whether it's good or bad or whatever. It's a humbling thing to have someone say this to you. And she was saying it out of love, by the way. Like, I was not offended when she said this. And in fact, it was just a very interesting reflection that she was giving to me. So that's one thing. But second of all, I'm like, yeah, hi, my parents were dying and were dead over here. I was going through a very traumatic breakup. I have no doubt that I was off and I was operating at a very low frequency place. Like, what can you expect out of someone who's going through all of that all at once, right? So let me say this to you right now. Give yourself permission to have a lower frequency right now. It is absolutely okay. The goal is just to heighten this. Like, think of this as like you can only go up from here. And that is what I am hoping that we can do today in this episode, just to kind of get you started, right? The thing is, I am so glad she said this to me. Again, she approached it in a very loving, very like compassionate way, but she did it in such a way that was like, I'm just putting this out there. What do you think? Like, and again, just reflecting that back on me. And it really made me think. This is like the essence of what I do when I coach people. It's asking these deep, thought-provoking questions. It's throwing these things out there and kind of seeing like how it feels for us. And these things that she said to me, just like that one sentence of wisdom actually, changed the way that I felt about my relationships with people of all kinds, friends, family, romantic relationships, really kind of forever. Like, it was that profound. So let's get into this a little bit, because this is honestly so important, whether or not you're even experiencing a loss. It's how we nurture ourselves, and it's how we nurture relationships with those around us. And these high vibrations and these high frequencies, and making sure that is in our life and surrounding us, that is more important than you might think. So let's break this down just a little bit here, because so far, it might sound like I'm kind of using like vibrational levels and frequencies sort of interchangeably, but there is a difference here. So Donna Eden, who is an energy healer and leading proponent of energy medicine in America, says this really, really well. She says, every single person has different vibrations representing who you are. They also reflect what you've gone through and are going through at the moment. So what does that all mean, really? Basically, the higher your vibration is, the more theoretically in touch you are with your higher self, your inner god or goddess, your divinity, consciousness, holiness, soul, whatever word out there best describes your true nature that resonates with you. This also means that the lower your vibration is, the more out of sync you are or could be with your higher nature, with your highest self, and therefore the more conflict you may experience in life. So with that being said, let's look at some examples of low and high vibrations just so we can kind of wrap our head around this a little bit. If you find yourself constantly fighting with emotions like anger, jealousy, bitterness, pessimism, guilt, or blame, you may be caught up in a cycle of low vibration. But not to worry, there are ways to ease out of this. And to give you a better idea of what some of these other low vibrational examples might be, this could be you are feeling stuck or kind of stranded in life, not really knowing what to do next. You might struggle with apathy or an uncaring attitude toward yourself and others. And often, you guys, this is a little out of our control. So again, be gentle with yourself here. Maybe you are emotionally distant. You struggle with constant fatigue or lethargy. You often struggle with despair and desperation. You find it difficult to get unstuck from old habits. You harbor feelings of resentment and jealousy. You find it hard to forgive yourself or other people. You might suffer from guilt. For example, you might constantly feel guilty about something or seek out things to feel guilty about, again, whether or not you even mean to do that. You find it hard to see the beauty in life. You feel unfulfilled. Your connections with others constantly bring you pain or dis-ease. You easily fall into victim-based mindsets. You focus primarily on the negative in life, and you might struggle to feel gratitude. Now, I know that was a lot, but let's shift our focus to some more high vibrational examples here. So let's see what you might resonate with on sort of both of these lists that I'm presenting here. So some high vibrational things. You are self-aware. For example, you are conscious of what you are saying, doing, thinking, and feeling, as well as the effect that this has on other people around you. You are empathetic towards others' needs, and you make a habit of seeing things through the eyes of other people, putting yourself in their shoes. You are emotionally balanced. You feel connected to that which is beyond you. So for example, life, divinity, love. You have a great sense of humor towards life. You don't take things too seriously. You regularly feel gratitude for what you have in your life. You don't necessarily, quote, need anything to feel happy. You're in tune with your body and what it needs. You nurture yourself often. You nurture others often. You often experience these beautiful synchronicities, and you live in the present more than in the past or the future. Now, I know that was a big list. And if you are listening to this podcast and you are trying to navigate life with grief, a lot of what I just said might feel very out of reach. It feels very unrealistic. And you might be like, Tara, I am nowhere near that right now. I just want to validate you really quick. I want you to know I see you, I hear you, I feel you. As always with this podcast or any other content I put out there, I just want this to be something that we are planting seeds on. I think this is really important to hear. I've talked about this in a recent episode where it was really important for me early on in my grief, even if I wasn't receptive to these things, even if I wasn't like mentally there, to hear this and to know that these high vibrational things were out there. And it encouraged me and it empowered me, and it kind of like gave me something to work toward again, right? When I just felt super hopeless and very directionless and just very lonely without my parents. But like I knew I couldn't live there and I didn't want to live in that darkness. So take all of this with just face value today, okay? But keep listening because what we're getting into next is very important. So one of the easiest ways to determine whether you are operating at a high or a low vibrational level is paying attention to how you feel physically. So literally right now, even maybe if it's appropriate to do, however you're listening to this episode, is check in with yourself right now. Do you feel light, energized, clear-minded, healthy? And if so, chances are you are operating at a higher vibrational level. On the other hand, if you are feeling weighed down, repressed, oppressed, you are most likely operating at a low vibration. And there are so many factors as to why this can be, and we are going to get into that a little bit, but I'm just going to sort of tease this a little bit. Not only is it important for us to tap into these high vibes however we can, but surrounding ourselves with really high vibrational things and places and people, that is a really important piece to this. Okay, so hang with me. Let's switch gears here a little bit and answer the question, what is emotional vibrational frequency? So everything is energy. And everything has a vibration. Like seriously, everything. Maybe if you're sitting in a chair right now, that chair you're sitting on, or the floor that you're standing on, maybe you're on a walk, literally the grass or the concrete or whatever it is that you're walking on. Perhaps it's the phone in your hand or the shades of color that you see. All of it. And most importantly, if you are listening to this episode today, your thoughts. Your thoughts are a pivotal piece to this entire puzzle because everything, even your thoughts, vibrate at different frequencies. So in her book, Frequency, The Power of Personal Vibration, Penny Pierce explains how we all have personal vibrations that radiate from our being and can change depending on what we are thinking, what we're feeling, and our actions. So she says, you can let your personal vibration match the world's chaotic soup of frequencies and feel buffeted about helplessly, or you can determine how you want to feel. Your personal vibration or energy state is a blend of the contracted or expanded frequencies of your body, emotions, and thoughts at any given moment. The more you allow your soul to shine through you, the higher your personal vibration will be. And there's just one more excerpt that I want to share here from Authenticity Associates Coaching and Counseling, and this pretty much nails it. And they say, what you think of as emotion is actually the experience of energy moving through your physical body. We experience emotion as energy frequencies, and they're correlating physical sensations in the body, such as expansion or contraction. Feelings are the interpretation and labels we apply to the experience of emotion, such as sad, mad, or glad. So one thing I just want to expound on there a little bit is what they said about expansion or contraction. So in grief, or if we are just having a really difficult day, so often one of the pieces of advice that I give people is doing just one thing that brings you just a little happiness or a little joy that day. Whether it is like a little cappuccino and you are just feeling the warmth of that in your hands, that's like my go-to, or reading a chapter of a book that really inspires you, or it's listening to a podcast episode that empowers you a little bit, whatever this looks like for you. Sometimes it's hard for people to hear, like, just do one thing that sparks joy for you. I totally get that. When I say that, I want us to dig deeper here. And this is one of the ways that we do that. Because it's not even like joy or profound happiness or whatever is the goal in that moment. It's literally how it makes your body and your mind feel. And asking yourself that question with anything that we do, does this feel good or does this feel bad? And your intuition and your true feelings about that will guide you, and it will tell you right away, yep, this feels good, or nope, that feels bad. And so often, if we really tap into this, you can feel that expansion or that contraction, because things that don't feel good and things that are negative, that will contract you, that will constrict you. Whereas things that are really positive and uplifting and beautiful and happy, that expands you. Things that make us feel good will quite literally make us expand. So it might make our shoulders go back a little bit. It makes our face light up a little. Whereas things that are contracting, we can maybe feel it in our posture, or we can kind of feel it in our chest. It just doesn't feel right? It's not a good vibrational match. So let's now talk a little bit about how positive and negative vibrations affect us. So I kind of just gave a little bit of this away, but we're not only affected by our own vibrations, but we're also affected by the vibrations of those around us too. So a perfect example, have you ever walked into a room or witnessed someone walk in a truly terrible mood? Like maybe you feel even a very subtle but undeniable kind of shift in the air that you couldn't maybe quite explain. But whatever it was more negative than it was moments before. That is a real thing that you're feeling. Vibrations can be felt from people, places, and the things around us. So with that, it makes sense that vibrations can affect us both positively and negatively. The good news is that we get to decide what frequency and at what level of vibration we want to live in. And yes, this is actually a choice. We get to decide how people, places, and things influence us for the better or for the worse. So I just want to share a quick personal example here because I think so many of you can probably relate to this somehow in your own way. When my mom was close to dying, and for even weeks afterward, there were two friends of hers that I would speak to on the phone every week or two. It was fairly often. They both had different ways of bringing my vibrational level down, my frequency level down. But the result was always the same. After we got off the phone, I would feel drained, used, unfulfilled, and like I had just spent the last hour comforting them when I needed supportive people around me more than ever. I was the one that was needing my cup filled at that point. Like I was the one that was seeing her decline and her sitting in that hospital bed, you know? Now, not that their concerns or anything that they were saying was not valid, and it was like that, like, I needed the support and they didn't, but there was just no awareness of like who they were talking to, and they actively made me feel worse because I did not know how to set boundaries and I did not understand the importance of boundaries at that point. So I just want to ask you, like, have you ever felt this way? Think about this and feel free to seriously DM me or shoot me an email. Have you been through this? Has there ever been someone in your orbit that has done this to you? And here's the thing. They weren't adding anything positive or beautiful or valuable to my life. They were, whether knowingly or unknowingly, probably unknowingly to be honest, taking from me and draining me in a time when I needed to be built up. And again, it's not that they didn't need to be built up, but again, I think it's just such a delicate balance that we have to strike sometimes of like knowing your audience, right? So there came a point where I got really good at recognizing when things were going in a negative direction, especially with these two. And that is when I would try and politely excuse myself from the phone call. Eventually, I stopped allowing these calls altogether, or I only responded when I knew I was in a better headspace in that moment. Sadly, one of these relationships, I just pretty much had to cut off completely because of how out of hand it was getting. Don't wish this person any ill will. It was just, I finally realized my boundaries and I started sticking to them. Now, this was before vibrational and frequency levels were introduced to me in a really personal way that really resonated. But had I known what I know now, I would not have given them the power to take my already very dwindling energy from me. Let me tell you. It was a hard lesson to learn, but I had to learn it. And now I'm almost a little bit grateful for it because I will never make that mistake again. And what's amazing about all of this is that our lives expand when we're living at a higher vibrational level. So like putting grief and loss and adversity aside just for a moment. I don't want to discount those things. This is not to negate that, but I just want to put this out there. Our lives begin to flow differently when we are living at a higher vibrational level. And of course, it's going to flow differently and our lives are going to change for the better. Hey, my friend, are you needing some relief from your grief? If so, I have an exciting new offering coming really soon that will help you get exactly that. My 14-day Relief in Your Grief challenge brings you powerful, impactful, bite-sized daily content alongside the perfect meditation. One of the biggest struggles I hear from my members, clients, and people on social media is that they just need some relief from the stress, sadness, and pain that grief and loss can cause. But here's the thing. So many people are lost and unsure about where to start. This can feel like a huge thing to tackle, so we are doing it together and we're starting with just 14 days. Give me 2 weeks and I will help you begin to take that anxiety, heartache, and anguish and turn it into peace, clarity, and hope as you move forward with your grief. Seriously, what do you have to lose by joining? Challenge your grief and give yourself some relief, my friend. I have no doubt this 14 days will be an inspiring, uplifting, perspective-changing experience for you. Join now through the link in the show description. But I'm going to just ask you here, have you ever had one of those days where it felt like Murphy's Law was just like out to get you? Like literally every possible thing that could go wrong went wrong. Here's a quick example of this. My husband and I experienced a day just like this before we had 2 wedding ceremonies. For those who don't know, this was our second ceremony that we were getting ready for. And it was a fun little test for our relationship, that is for sure. So basically, we had to run a last minute errand that we didn't expect, which then put us behind in getting our rental car that day. We get to the rental car office and the office wasn't on the map where we thought it was, where it said it was. And mind you, I should preface this is in Italy, right? So we live in the US right now, but this second ceremony was in Italy. So we're in Florence when all of this is happening. So rental car place wasn't where it said it was. We finally figure out where it was. It was square across the parking lot. So we had to sprint across this huge lot in pouring rain where it actually was, only to stand in line for over an hour because they don't always move quick in Italy. Love the country to death, but there's not always a lot of rush. We get the keys to the car, couldn't find the car in the parking lot for over 20 minutes. I'm standing there with our luggage. My husband's like literally out looking. We finally get in the car. We finally start driving down. We know we are so late. We have people to meet. We have people that have flown in for this. This is literally the day before the ceremony. We're driving down. For some reason, there was an exorbitant amount of traffic at this toll booth that we had to go through. Literally, we were stuck at this toll booth for over 30 minutes on the way down from Florence to Siena. We had a wine tasting set up that day. We missed the wine tasting. Okay, this is such a first world problem, I know. So I'm not saying I'm so devastated over missing this wine tasting. It was the core of what I'm trying to say here is that everything that we had planned for that day, everything that we thought was going to go right, none of it quite went right. And it ended up being a beautiful day and everything was fine. So I will spare you the rest of the details. There are worse things happening in the world, right? But here is my point. We had to work especially hard that day to not allow each other's frequencies get too low. We are partners. We are husband and wife. And as two deeply connected people in that way, it's really easy to bounce those negative vibrations off of each other throughout the day, and also positive ones. He was getting cranky and kind of negative because he felt bad for keeping people waiting. He was just like frustrated with everything going on. I was as well, rightfully so. And so I started feeling even more cranky and more negative than I already was. And it was almost like if he's hurting or if he's in a bad mood, then my mood was affected and vice versa. And I just want to know here, empaths, especially if you're an empath listening here, you probably have an especially difficult time with this because empaths really feel the emotions of others so personally and tend to take that on. So it's so critical to put in the work to experience your own feelings independent of another so that you can maintain your own high, happy, and healthy frequency. And when you do that, you emanate that so other people can soak it up too. And I just want to note here, it's not about toxic positivity. It's not all about being positive when you're not really feeling that way. Not at all. We are human, right? We have to feel that way. It's more just showing up for ourselves. It's understanding and checking in with ourselves. Okay, what am I feeling? Okay, let me take a breath. And how can I move through this? It's not how I can get rid of it. It's not putting pressure on ourselves to feel better and get that out of our head. Not at all. We need to feel those things. But it's understanding that so often this negativity, this anger, this sadness, everything, it is temporary. It passes, just as sadness and longing and all of these things can come into our lives. So can joy and happiness, right? So it's all about just this natural flow of things. And the more you allow yourself to live in that low frequency, the more you're allowing yourself to succumb to weakened energy. And the amazing Dr. Wayne Dyer writes about this in his book, The Power of Intention. And I just love this little quote here so much. He says, "The higher your frequency, the more capable you are of nullifying and converting lower energies, which weaken you." I think that's just so beautifully said, and there's so much accuracy to that. So as far as frequency levels during grief specifically, for me, when I was going through the lowest of my lows, you can imagine how atrocious my frequency level was. And I am sure yours has been affected too. Maybe it is right this minute. And if you're here because you've been through some form of loss, which I'm sure you are in some capacity, I know you feel me on this. And some moments can feel way lower than others. So talk about exhausting, right? It took a lot of hard work. It took a lot of boundary setting, like I said, and giving myself grace to raise my frequency levels and feel like a functioning human being again in my own time. You can't force it if it's not there, but remember that baby steps are really important. And sometimes it takes someone bringing it to your attention, like I am hopefully doing today, to help get you there and just to bring some awareness to it. So I'm just going to slowly start closing this episode out with the 20 tips that I mentioned in the beginning of the episode to help raise your frequency. And I've applied, I would basically say all of these to my daily life at some point or another. And even outside of any loss that I've experienced, this has really just been such a pivotal mindset shift for me, even despite everything that I've been through, because our grief, it is sacred. It is a big, important thing for us, but so is just living life and living that as beautifully and vibrantly and meaningfully as possible. And it's really also just a beautiful way to acknowledge your self-worth and bring in all of those positive vibes for yourself and those around you. All right, so let's go through these real quick here. Number one way to increase your frequency and these positive vibes around you. Surround yourself with positive, happy, growth mindset people. I certainly hope to be this for you always, but think about who around you can bring this out in you or who does bring this out in you, and maybe spend a little more time with them. And if nobody around you really does this right now, I really encourage you, join a community of people who do meet some new people. That's a beautiful process, and it can feel a little intimidating and a little uncomfortable at first, but I promise you, when you surround yourself with people who bring this out in you, oh my God, it makes such a difference. It makes such a difference. Number 2, reciting positive affirmations. Again, this is not to negate your grief. This is not me telling you like, oh, just think positively or just get your affirmations in for the day and you'll be fine. No, it really goes a lot deeper than that. This is probably more for another conversation another day, but even just choosing some affirmations that really resonate with you and meditating on those and really breathing into those on a daily basis, it's just one thing. It is just one step that can really bring these vibrational levels up quite a bit. Number 3, practice self-love, always. Number 4, I mentioned this before, practice living in the present. Especially with grief, it can be very, very easy to live in the past. We can long for what we no longer have, and or live in the future and be nervous or unsure or, unsettled about what that might bring. We can't go back into the past. We can't go forward into the future. All there is literally right now, what's in front of you. And my friend, that is within your control too. So just remember this today. Practice living in that present. There are a lot of beautiful ways to do this. Number 5, being aware of your emotions. Again, it's not to quickly rush them along if they're negative or anything like that. It's actually quite the opposite. It is to really feel into them when they come. Have that awareness, recognize what it is that you're feeling, embrace it, feel it in its entirety, and move it along, just like anything else in life. Number 6, focus on 3 highlights and 3 things that you're thankful for each day. This can be even the smallest things. I mentioned earlier my little cappuccino trick. I love that, but whatever beverage might be more your vibe, I welcome that. I mentioned these 3 highlights and the 3 things that you are grateful for each day. Again, not to negate your grief. It is not simply just saying 3 things and moving it along. That in and of itself is not going to be a cure for your grief. We're not trying to cure grief here, right? We're just trying to experience it and move through it. But these highlights and the things that we're grateful for and everything, this is, for those who don't know, I have my Losses Become Gains daily journal available on Amazon. This is what I've incorporated into that daily practice. It's life-changing. It is game-changing. I promise you. It's all about little mindset shifts. It's a step in the right direction. And you're starting your day off on a little bit more of a positive and a little bit more of the right foot. That's really all it is. Number 7, focus on positive thoughts, beliefs, and optimism. That includes believing in yourself. So like we were talking about, all of those low frequency, low vibrational things, it's very easy to get caught up there. It is very easy to get caught in that victim mentality. Again, it's all about the mindset shifts here and just believing, just plant the seed. Again, just start to believe that you can tap into these higher frequencies, these beautiful higher vibrational levels. Just know that they're out there. That's it. If that's all you can do today, that's all I want you to do. Number 8, surround yourself in nature. Cannot recommend this enough. I always say walk at least maybe 10 to 15 minutes a day, gets those endorphins going, and that fresh air, it is critical. Number 9, clearing away mental and emotional clutter. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in our mind and on our hearts when we experience loss or some form of adversity. And that's why I just bring this back to staying really present. Also, writing things down is another thing I just kind of quickly recommend here as far as like clearing this away, because when we just allow things to live so much in our mind and we just ruminate and just go back and forth on all these thoughts over and over and over, they have nowhere to go, right? So whether you are writing it down just to like help get it out of your mind for a moment to kind of come back to it later, maybe you're saying these things aloud in a voice note so you can really like reflect that back to yourself and even hear the inflection in your voice. both of those examples are beautiful ways to help kind of clear away that mental and emotional clutter, so to speak. Number 10 is literally decluttering and organizing your physical living space. Make sure it is bright, it is clean. It's amazing what letting that natural sunlight do for you. And also just, cluttered space, cluttered mind. So these two things, number 9 and number 10, kind of go hand in hand here a little bit. Number 11, honor yourself and your choices. Pretty simple. Like I was saying earlier, when I had to set those boundaries, it was uncomfortable at first. I cared a lot how these people would react. I thought they would give me a hard time. And frankly, they kind of did, one of them especially. But I made that choice confidently. I managed to somehow find the confidence to really set that boundary. And I honored that. And I gave myself grace as I did it. Number 12, be kind and compassionate, even when you are not feeling very giving. Yes, I know that's hard. And I also want to say here, it can feel especially hard to want to do this and to be able to do this when you maybe feel like people are not being kind and compassionate back to you. That happens. That happens in and out of grief. I want to acknowledge that. Again, I encourage you, find people around you. If you don't have this right now, or not as much as you would like, surround yourself with that kindness and that compassion. That starts with you, but making sure that you have places and people and things in your orbit that treats you with that kindness and compassion as well. That is key. Number 13, smile and laugh. Seriously, smile and laugh. I know it's hard. If you are grieving especially, it could feel like the last thing that you want to do. Whether it is watching a funny show and actually giving yourself permission to laugh. For me, The Office was a big one. I remember asking this on social media, like, what TV shows and movies got you through this? The Office was like number one for so many people. It was for me as well, amongst other things. So allowing yourself to do that, making sure you know that you can go out with friends or do something and giving yourself permission that it's okay to smile and laugh and be happy. You're not dishonoring your loved one if you do that. Number 14, very simple, get good, healthy sleep. I know how impossible this can feel, especially trying to even get to sleep when we are just so in mourning for our loved one. Maybe it's a partner that would sleep next to us, and all of a sudden you have this empty space in your bed next to you. There's scarcely a more difficult thing than that. I just want to say that. I want to acknowledge that no matter who it is that you've lost, whether it is a parent, a child, grandparent, whoever, be really gentle with yourself here as far as the sleep goes. Again, I really encourage journaling and really getting any thoughts out that you're having before you go to bed, because that will just kind of help unpack things a little bit and just ease your mind just a little as you're trying to sleep. Number 15, exercise, whatever this looks like for you right now. Don't put pressure on yourself if you just are not there, but I really can't express the importance of it enough. Running, whether it's weight training, yoga, walking, literally anything, even if it's only 10 minutes, I promise you that might even encourage you to do more once you get going. So it's a really important practice to make sure you have in your day somewhere, somehow. Number 16, meditation and practicing visualization. This is so important. I have so many tools and resources about this. We talk about this in my membership. We go into detail about this. I provide a lot of resources on both of these things, but if you do not have a daily meditation practice currently, or that is just not something that you currently do, can't recommend that enough. And as far as visualization exercises go, I personally love those so much because it can really help you visualize your best life, and not even just literally what that looks like, but how you want it to feel. And like we've been talking about today, when it comes to keeping our vibrational levels and frequency levels as high as possible, really feeling that and like what that could feel like for us So, so important. Number 17, surround yourself with a high energy field and environment. So kind of like I was saying earlier, this goes a little bit along with like the decluttering, the organizing, just making sure your environment, your work environment, home environment, even your car, right, is just pleasant. Just make it a pleasant place to be. Maybe you get some crystals and put those around and making sure you're charging them outside in the sun, right? Maybe it's a candle or some incense, or just like making your space smell good. Maybe it's having a little bit of music going in the background that uplifts you, right? There's so many beautiful, just small ways that we can just raise the energy in our environment, no matter where we are. Number 18, enjoying aromatherapy. I am a huge lavender girl. I won't go too far into detail on this one, but lavender especially can be very, very calming, very healing, can really help with that sleep if that is something you're struggling with. So really just incorporating some aromatherapy into your day-to-day a little bit. Number 19, maintaining a healthy diet, drinking lots of water. I have talked about this in previous episodes. I will not beat a dead horse on this one, but I know this can feel like the last thing on your list, but seriously, whatever balanced diet you can manage right now, making sure you're drinking lots of water so it can really help your brain be really with it and sharp as possible, and just maintaining our daily health and what our body needs to function and survive. Critical, obviously. Number 20, I've just said this one. I kind of gave this away accidentally, but watching quality shows or listening to things or podcasts or whatever this looks like for you that make you feel happy. That's it. However, caveat here, making sure that you have the awareness to unplug. So for me personally, this was really, I think, after my dad died and like both parents were gone now and I was very much alone. My husband and I didn't get back together for a little while after that, and I spent a lot of time alone. I definitely had my days where I watched a lot of TV, I worked, I went through a lot of motions, but sometimes watching a trashy show or watching a show with a little bit of humor was like literally the only uplifting thing in my day. I know that's so sad, but I know there's so many grievers that go through that too. So that's great. That's important. It's a good reminder that happiness and joy and laughter is still out there. But again, be really careful with this, okay? Too much TV time, it's not good for anybody. So I always say it's just all about balance. It's all about moderation, and it's okay to do those things, but remember to unplug, maybe read before you go to bed, but whatever you can do to just keep those good vibes going. If you're reading something, maybe it's an autobiography, or maybe it's just a fiction book, but it's something that is kind of like wanderlusty and makes you sort of feel like hopeful in life again. I've been there. I've done that. Those are the types of books that I tend to go for. But think about that. Maybe art, maybe you paint, maybe you sketch, maybe you write poetry. Just however it is that you can like challenge yourself a little bit and just bring some creativity into your life. However you can keep those positive vibes going, even when you got to turn the TV off. So to close this out, I just want to remind you that especially if you are going through a tough time or you are deep in your grief, it can be difficult to feel like you can even tap into any of what I've talked about today, or as though getting your vibrational and frequency levels up is even possible. Be patient with this process. Know that this will ebb and flow as all things do. This is nothing new here. And don't feel pressure to have your frequency super high and off the charts all day, every day. Even for a non-grieving person, that's not even realistic. But I do want to remind you, starting your day with as much positive energy as you can genuinely makes a difference. I want you to think big. I want you to think healing. I want you to think peace, think happiness, think growth, and I want you to love on yourself. Because when you love on yourself and you are gentle with yourself, you attract people who love, respect, and appreciate your energy. And when that happens, that is what you'll attract more of. So this is your sign to do that today, to be magnetic and be a magnet for healing and for joy and for peace. I really hope this little crash course or friendly reminder of how important keeping our vibrations and frequency up was helpful today, especially as we're grieving or going through a difficult time. It can truly, truly help us on a day-to-day basis and just cope just a little better. And it is honestly such a game changer when you can really tap into this, bring awareness to it, and make it a daily practice, all while allowing ourselves to grieve and feel our feels in the process. If this episode resonated with you or you found it helpful, I would so appreciate you sharing it with someone you know if they could use this little uplifting, friendly reminder today, or any episode on this podcast. If you find it helpful, it truly means so much to me so I can reach more people navigating life with grief, just like you are, perhaps. So as always, I'm sending you so much light and love, and I will catch you in the next episode. I am sending you a huge thank you for tuning into today's episode, my friend. I'm so grateful you're here and for the steps you are taking to heal your heart, open your mind, fulfill your soul, learn, grow, and evolve, and move through this crazy thing called life in big, beautiful, impactful ways. Visit lossesbecomegains.com for my blog, ways to work with me, to shop my daily journal, and so much more. And be sure you're following along on Instagram and Facebook at Life with Grief Podcast. I love seeing new faces, meeting new people, hearing your stories, and supporting you however I can. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you haven't left a rating or a review, please do so. I would so appreciate it. Or if you feel so inclined, to share this episode or this podcast with someone who could use it too. I'll catch you in the next episode.